Hi there, thank you for inviting me here to speak today. I'll just tell you a little about myself. I am Fiona, and this is Percy, and I have been vegan for 47 years. I went vegan when I was 6 years old. I went vegetarian when I was 3 years old. Totally self-inspired reaction to the abuse of animals. That's as simple as it is. At 3 years old, I've made the connection where flesh comes from. I knew what meat was, and I rejected it. As I went on a little bit, I started to ask my mother questions about eggs and leather, and she explained. I was very, very fortunate that she was honest with me. It did lead to problems as childhood to understand all those issues that young people today face. So I didn't say to my mum, I want to go vegan. I wouldn't have even known what the word vegan was. It was the principle that I was, adhering to, not the actual word. Life was very, very straightforward to start with. I come from a very, very humble background. My dad was a striking miner, and my mother was a pianist, piano teacher turned nurse. So when people say to me, oh, I'd like to go vegan, but it's so expensive, I can't do it. Well, I'm the cheapest I'm practically a freegan, let alone a vegan. Because when people ask me, like when I go on all these panels with all these top athletes, and they say, what do you eat? The truth is that I just eat bits that are thrown away for the pigs and cut the bad bits off, and my mum cooks them up. I'm not that fussed about food. Food is a fuel to me. It is not something to be fussed over. And I went to a plant-based health professionals conference, and I did a 30-minute talk. When I arrived there, the lady who'd organised it, set big auditorium. She said, put your hand up if you're a doctor or a specialist in some. And practically all the hands went up, and I thought, oh crikey, I'm boxing above my weight here. And when it came down to them asking questions about what I eat, I actually also, something quite strange about my diet is I only eat one meal a day, and I eat that in the evening. And I always say in my defence, I feel very blessed to live in a country where food is not an issue in terms of the fact we have enough to eat, without stressing too much about the content of it. As long as there's enough and it's vegan, then I'm not really, really bothered. Because I've been vegan for 47 years, people say, oh, you must be like some vegan guru, you know everything. I know nothing. My only strong point is that I admit this, I acknowledge this, and I want to learn more. It's a vegan learning curve for me. Life is just a learning curve, and I'm in a journey for however long that journey lasts. So when I was young, it was quite easy for me. I was obviously at home. We were very, very lucky in that back in the 1970s, my mum had a piano teacher who was a vegan lady. She actually knew Donald Watson, the instigator of the Vegan Society, and she was able to articulate to my mum in adult terms what I was feeling and going through as a child. So she was able to help her with kind of nutritional things. But I still basically eat what I was eating back then, because I've never had ice creams and cakes and stuff like that. I've never really had that sort of thing. I don't crave them, so I don't feel the need to replace them. That's not to say I don't find these substitutes important for other people who have been brought up on those products and do want them in their life. I just don't. In an ideal world, I would like to see civilization a bit like me, where they don't crave these things because they've never had them in generations to come. But we're dealing with the now. So anyway, life went pretty smoothly for me, very outdoorsy, always into nature, always into sport. During my teenage years, I was hospitalised a lot through orthopedic reasons. Nothing to do with being vegan at all. So problems with my knees, which led me to have quite a radical operation, which meant that I had my kneecap removed on this side, and I was told at that point that I would never walk again, let alone be able to run, which was a bit of a body blow for me as a very athletic kid. I will say at that point, in and out of hospital, this is back in the 1980s, that my veganism was aligned to an eating disorder, and my mum was threatened with prosecution for child cruelty for allowing me to be vegan. So you can see what it was like back then. It's never been easy. After that, because a sedentary life was what I'd been led to believe that I would have to follow, I went to London and I got a job as a secretary. I know, that's unbelievable that I would be working as a secretary. I wasn't the world's best secretary, but bless him, I had a very, very nice boss who understood that I really didn't want to be behind a desk typing away. It was always a dream of mine to actually have an animal sanctuary. I never thought it would become a reality. Just to explain to the younger people in the audience, we bought Tower Hill Stables back in 1996. That's the main site of the sanctuary. It always was to very recently. And it cost £226,000. But Martin, my partner, sold his bungalow, detached bungalow, in Ongar for £86,000. So it was a huge differential to try and get somewhere with some land. Why we did it at that point, well, I must explain, because it's very, very complicated, because there's so much to it. I was working in London, and my boss... I was living in rented accommodation, rescuing there. So I got like pit bulls, I got chickens, chinchillas, all in this rescued accommodation. And one day my landlady came round to actually just inform me she was going to sell the house. And she opened the door, and I opened it, and I was holding a poorly chicken. And she kind of looked at me and said, I'm coming to sell the house. She wasn't that angry that I'd got animals in there, but I'd got to move out. So my dad said, look, you need to buy somewhere. You've got all these animals. I didn't really look into the terms of tenancy, and no one would let you keep like a menagerie. So he said, you need to buy somewhere. So I bought myself a little end terrace cottage. And unfortunately, the buying process was taking longer than the eviction process. So my boss, Nigel, terribly, terribly posh man who was married to some lady who lived in Wimbledon, and his mother was lady in waiting to the Queen or something like that. He said, look, I feel responsible for you. You'll have to come and live with me. I said, Nigel, with the best will in the world, I don't think Karina's going to want me. 47 bites, because I come from I took to cycling because I couldn't run. Like loads of chickens, chinchillas and whatever in Wimbledon with you and your 3 kids. He said, take your point. So what happened then was he literally marched me round to where Martin was sitting, pretending to work, because Nigel was approaching with me. And he said, Martin, do you know my secretary, Fiona? Yes, I think so. We've met her. Oh, right. Well, she needs to come and live with you for a while, because she's actually buying a house where you actually live, and you've just bought one. So it was, I think Martin didn't really want me there. He just didn't want to upset Nigel. So anyway, I moved in there, and then he wasn't vegan, he wasn't vegetarian, but he'd moved out of the house because he was thinking of becoming vegetarian, living with his parents, and his mother was one of these mums that says, no way am I cooking 2 meals. While you live under this roof, you eat that kind of thing. So he'd bought a bungalow of his own. So then we started to rescue a little bit more. We got a bigger garden, and we also had horses at local farms. And it's because one of these horses, a rehabilitated racehorse, Oscar, had an accident. I used to go to work, cycle to work, about 40 miles each way, and on the way I'd call and do the horses. And I cycled home, I called my horses, we got 8 at that time. 7 came, Oscar didn't come, went into the field and found him impaled on a fence. He'd had a dreadful accident. Later found out that the farmer, whilst I'd been at work, had allowed people to go and shoot rabbits in the field. Oscar had got frightened and damaged his hindquarter. He nearly lost his life on barbed wire. So now we're kind of teetering on this kind of, we need somewhere of our own. We need to alter this model. We can't keep on with this. But how are we going to ever afford that? So, but this pushed us over the limit. We nearly lost Oscar. He was at the vet for 13 weeks. And in that 13-week period, we literally went full throttle to try and get somewhere with some land where we could care for the animals on our terms rather than on someone else's. We didn't set it up as a sanctuary in terms of a business or anything like that. It was a place of sanctuary for the animals we'd already rescued. So how we went about getting this Tower Hill Stables, I really don't know. I mean, I told my parents, my mum's been very, very pivotal in everything I've done. She's very, very supportive. All my elderly great aunts, now I do use this story a lot, you probably heard it. Great Aunt Nancy, she told her, Fiona, there's a chance she might be able to get somewhere for the animals to go. So Auntie Nancy, she's 98 years old, she went over to her bed, fished under the mattress, got £1,000 out, in a sock, ready for a funeral, and said, give her that, and I just won't have to die just yet. And it was literally like that. At one point, my mum had more mortgages than Santander to pay. She got the mortgage I got on the house, she got the mortgage, she'd remortgaged their house, literally. But anyway, cobbled together, we got Tower Hill Stables. And then we went full throttle into rescue. Okay, you could never take a pig. Can I put my pig at your farm, please, farmer? It was only horses, livery yards that I could do that. So now I could start rescuing the animals with no voice, the victims, the real voiceless animals. Only a few acres, though. I mean, we couldn't afford much. It was all we could afford. What have we got now at the sanctuary? I'll cut to forward wind 20-odd years. That was in 1996. We've now got about 500 rescued animals. We have got 100 horses. We have got probably 103 because somebody rang me last night late and asked if I could take 2 Shetland ponies and a disabled foal. We have got 147 pigs. We've got 86 sheep. We've got 42 cows. We've got all sorts of birds, turkeys, chickens, peacocks, swans, just about you name it. We don't have an awful lot of what are called domestic animals, dogs and cats. We've got feral cats. Dogs. We did used to rescue more dogs, but now we've got more space. I actually rent altogether we've got about 100 acres for this menagerie. With regard to the dogs, I tend to take in the kind of animals that nobody wants. So if somebody comes to you, the bull breeds are the ones that cannot find homes. All my dogs are bull breeds. People don't tend to come to you and say, I'm looking for an elderly dog. I'd like it to probably be quite aggressive. I'd like it to be on expensive medication. And ideally, if it could be incontinent, that would be a deal. But, they don't come for that. They're the ones I take. I always sound quite cheery in my talking. I like to be positive wherever I can. I won't go into details of what sort of situations these animals can come in. We've even had dogs that have been molested by humans, real sad cases. We get all that sort of thing. When you do rescue, I've done it for so long, you see the worst of humanity. You really, really do. So now what happens when somebody asks me to take an animal, I don't go into the details. I just accept and work with the animal, not what the humans told me about the animals, because how an animal reacts in the environment of contentment, peace and love, and how it's reacted before it came to the sanctuary is of no relevance to me. So they all live out. Cattle, everybody's got access to outdoors, all the large animals. And we're just one big happy family. But rewinding now to 1996, I am a pretty ambitious bunny in terms of I realise that I don't have a lot of power, but I've got a lot of need to make the most of the time that I have on this planet, because life is very transient and is very short in the scheme of things, so I always want to do more. So after I'd rented land as much as I could and took in as many animals as I could, I thought, hang on a minute, Fiona, I'm not the brain of Britain here, but I could rescue animals until literally the cows come home, but I'm not actually fixing the problem of why I'm taking them in. I'm addressing the symptoms, not the cause. And the cause is animal agriculture. It needs to end. It needs to end now. So what do I do? As I say, I've got no contacts. Now, for younger people, I keep going on about younger people, they will not remember a time before social media. But there was no way of getting your message out there before social media. The only tool you'd got was mainstream. And for the mainstream media to act, you either got to do something very, very good or something very, very bad. As you can see, I'm a positive person, didn't want to do anything bad, but I'm thinking, well, what can I do to get attention? What can I do? The only thing I'm half good at is sport, but nobody is interested in women's sport. Hang on a minute. What's that I hear on the radio? Paula Radcliffe's winning marathon. Her name's been bandied everywhere. Marathon runner. And I'm not much of a runner. I've got no talent for running whatsoever. I've just got a lot of desire to do it for the animals. That's all I'm about. I just put in 100% of what I do. It's the same model for the sanctuary and whatever I'm doing. I want to do my best for them. And the logic behind it was, I better get good at marathon running then. That's all it is with my running. I just better get as good as I can. And the idea was, Paula Radcliffe's got this platform. People are talking about it. It's in the media. And at the time, before the more endurance races and all these kind of park runs came up, there were only a few marathons around, and it was billed as being the most extreme event on the athletics calendar. So I thought, if I can just complete a marathon, that's got to be definitive proof that on a vegan diet, you can pretty much do anything, even though I'm disabled. So, that's where it all started. But I realised then, after a while, okay, I enrolled in a running club. The only running club with any relevance to what I was actually running for was the Vegetarian Cycling and Athletics Club. And it was great, but well, I thought, well, I am vegetarian, but I'm vegan. I'm more than this. And when I started to qualify for like championship starts in London or elite races, which actually means on the biggest marathons in the world, you would be on the front row standing next to Paula Radcliffe. In London, a small handful of runners would go off 45 minutes before the men and the main race. So whatever was on your jersey was going to get seen by the masses. So a guy in the Vegetarian Cycling Athletics Club, Peter Simpson, said to me, why don't we start a vegan running club? And that's when, in 2004, Vegan Runners was started. And I proudly went out there, nubbling next to Paula. I felt so embarrassed on these start lines because, of course, when you're up there with all the Kenyans and the Ethiopians, and you kind of feel quite, how shall I put this, large. And they're coming along the line, and I'm proudly standing there with my Vegan Runner vest in. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm very proud, but I hope they've got a wide-angle lens on here because they're going to need it to get me on compared to, I look like a giant love child of Mrs. Blobby and the Michelin Man standing there next to these tiny little creatures. Anyway, so I started with my running career. My running career was basically based around 2 marathons a year, which I would go to and get invited to, and the rest of the time I just trained at home. I did try to get a coach to help me, but nobody back in that day would even touch somebody who was vegan. Yeah, you've got some ability, don't say talent, got some ability, but we're not going to help you because what you are doing with your diet is just going to negate anything we do with telling you how to run any quicker. So I thought, well, the diet is not a diet to me, it's a passion, it's my life. That's not up for debate. So I'll have to kind of do it by trial and error. Loads of trials, loads of errors. But I quickly formulated, I have very, very little time to be away from the sanctuary. I do not like to be away from the sanctuary. At the time, Martin was working because that was always the idea. You stay at home and look after the animals, I'll go to work and pay for it. That was it with the sanctuary. So he's off at work. I haven't got the spare time. He's only got his weekends when he's not working and he's tired. So I'm pretty much needed there. So by only doing 2 major marathons a year, it's economically friendly in terms of time and expense. They pay for me to go and I only need to be away for a weekend. I just used to literally hit the biggest races on the planet, Berlin, and place in them. Try and get right to the front, top 20s, Great North Run, whatever I was doing, just to promote veganism. That's all it was about. I eventually got to a point where I did look odd when I turned up at these races. In fact, I tell a story that I once went to Amsterdam Marathon. I was invited there by one of the best runners in the world's coaches, Haile Gebrselassie coach, Jos Hermans. And he sent me an email saying, we'd love you to come to Amsterdam and run, put you on the front start, great opportunity to promote veganism. And I still remember walking into the Olympic Stadium with this world record holding marathon runner and me and my vegan runner top. It was a really, really proud moment. And I went to sign on in the race hotel, which was for elite runners. And I remember kind of feeling all starstruck going in there. And, the guy kind of looked up and said, can I help you? I said, I've come to sign on. And he said, yes, it's at the Olympic Stadium. I think you've made a mistake. And I went, I've got this email from Jos Herman. And he kind of looked me up and down and said, you are on the elite start? And I said, I think so, yes. And he said, and we got chatting after that. He said, if you ran out your skin, you might come top 15, top 12. And I came 8th overall. And I think I was only beaten by Kenyans and Ethiopians, which obviously have the talent. And that's what I was going to say about my running. I don't have very much ability. I have a great disability. In fact, people always say to me, I thought I'd seen you. And I noticed somebody was limping. I say, I'm not the most stylish of runner at all. But it's the reason I'm out there running that drives me on, that gives me that extra level of determination. I don't care what I put myself through anymore for the animals. I'm done with all that. There's no Fiona, it's just for the animals. So anyway, I reached a point with my running. I'd run 2:38, personal best is 2:38 in the marathon. I wasn't going to get any quicker than that. So I thought, well, I'm either going to change it up or pull out of running, because obviously my running takes a lot of effort. I run 9 times a week. I do 3 lots of speed work. I really do, and I run over 100 miles a week. So somebody said to me, okay, you're not going to get any better in the big major marathons. Just go off around the world and win marathons, and then you can promote veganism globally through your running vest. And at the time, I was literally one of the only vegans in the village with regard to the running club. It has grown massively in the last few years, but this is like 2005, 6, 7. So yeah, I chugged off, and I kind of went off and broke course records and won marathons all over the place. At one race, I just beat all the men as well. I just went out flying off the front. I thought, I can keep this up, And but the one thing is, I was doing it for a two-pronged reason. When you do well in something, people say, oh, that's great. What do you do for a living? I don't do it for a living. And we'll say this. We take nothing out of the sanctuary. We still put everything into the sanctuary of our own. But they'll also say, I was hoping that they might recognise the veganism thing. That's the one side of it that at that time particularly was never being acknowledged. So I remember in 2012, Daily Mail, I know, a bit embarrassing, voted me Inspirational Woman of the Year. And they did this article on me, and it's great, and it's wonderful, and my mum went off and bought 50 copies of the Daily, not quite, but you know what I mean, she come back with them all. It's a bit embarrassing. And we're looking through it all excitedly, a woman of the desert, in an animal sanctuary, and I'm thinking, well, where's the mention about the veganism? And that's what people don't understand. You do an interview with a journalist or whoever, they don't send it back to you and say, are you happy with that? You don't send it back and say, no, I don't like that bit. Okay, it doesn't go like that. They take the interview and they just print it. You don't know what they're going to put, short of what you said. They're going to cherry pick out of it. And they did kind of keep cherry picking out the veganism, which was very, very annoying. So at that point, and I'm always a bit reluctant to say a friend, because I haven't got that many friends, but it's kind of, if people say your friends suggested you doing this, what do your enemies suggest you do? But one guy said to me, look, if you have... you've won marathons, you're a really quick runner, you've placed in the biggest major races, why don't you do the toughest foot race on the planet? Which was that? Well, I thought, well, that sounds a good idea. It did when he told me about it a year before the actual race. But when it got approaching, it's Marathon de Sable. And so what that is there's a week-long stage race. It's about roughly a marathon a day. One day is just over a double marathon. You're trudging through the Sahara Desert. You're carrying all your own supplies on your back. You've got no only thing you've got at night is a place to roll your sleeping mat out in. You've got no toilets. You've got very little water, and you've got to carry everything that you're going to need for the whole week. It's a tough race. Added to the fact you're trying to get through sand dunes that are 800 feet high. And one day it got to 55 degrees in temperature. It's pretty brutal, but I thought, I've run a 2:38 marathon. I can do this. So, yeah, right. So anyway, the week before, as I go back, Martin's there going to work, and literally, I was going off to Morocco on the Thursday, so it was going to be he'll get home from work, I'll go to Morocco and do this race. Unfortunately, on the Tuesday before the race, one of the elderly horses at the sanctuary charity, she's 42-year-old, thoroughbred, she got cast, she went down, she couldn't get up. So I'm there alone working, so it's my responsibility. I've got to get her to her feet. Horses can't be down long, especially when they're older. So I put all the ropes around her and pulled her to her feet, but unfortunately she stepped back and stood on my foot. So now I'm faced with going to the toughest foot race in the planet, week in the Sahara Desert, but remember, I've run a 2:38 marathon, I can do anything. But I've got 2 fractured toes. So I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? I've done all this training and I've got my kit. Obviously, not being the brain of Britain, I can do this. I think I can go and do it. Unfortunately, they do tell you to buy shoes a size too big when you go into this race, because your feet will surely swell when you arrive in this heat unless you're used to it. And indeed, my feet did swell when I arrived, but the problem was they'd swollen before I even go on this side, and I thought, I can just about cram it in if I put thin socks on, that kind of thing. So when I arrived there, I've got like the feet from hell. I'd had an allergic reaction to some heat-resistant tights or something I got on. My legs were massive, and I was like hobbling around for a week with 2 broken toes in the Sahara Desert. And I remember on the long stage, which was 100k, I took the gaffer tape off my toes, because I daren't show them to the race doctors, because I thought, they're going to pull me out. And all I could see, I said, here, Paul, this is another guy. What's that? He said, it's your bone in your toe. It's sticking out now. I thought, oh my God, I better put the gaffer tape back on and just get through this the best way I can. And people actually say to me, what did you eat that week? And I'd taken like a large supply of Mar Baker bars. That's what I got. My plan was based around Mar Baker bars because there wasn't the vegan expedition food back at that time. But I ended up with like a bag full of painkillers and a bag full of boiled sweets, and the rest of the stuff I just couldn't eat. I was very, very ill. But I got through it. And because I'd effected a rescue of a lady, one of the competitors, Rosie, she was really, really struggling. We were at the back of the pack. I was hobbling. I was okay fitness-wise, but I was very, very bad on my feet. And Rosie was just very, very bad. We were at the back of the race, and we went to climb a jebel, and I was nattering away, going up. And I looked back, and she's down the bottom of the jebel. She could just like crying. I could see the camel in the distance coming. That's like the sag wagon. To like, if that camel overtakes you, you're out the race. So I had to climb back down, get Rosie's pack, bring it to the top, and then go back down and do a fireman's lift and bring Rosie to the top of the jebel. And then I would say, flattering myself, that I ran on ahead and I didn't. I kind of hopped on ahead and got medical attention for it and finished the race. I know what you're thinking, fireman's lift. Yes, in my spare time, I do dabble. I am a retained firefighter, yes. Back in 2001, I was kind of hobbling along down the side of the road, and a gentleman drove up next to me and said, "Oi, you look relatively fit. Have you ever thought about becoming a firefighter?" Not every day do I get up and think, I must become a firefighter today. But I thought, I didn't even know we got a fire station, let alone a fire. Anyway, so I went off down there, and I thought to myself, yes, this is a good opportunity in terms of bringing veganism to an audience that would not necessarily address it, i.e. the fire brigade. When I actually went there to get in, I remember on the drill ground, you're asked to roll out hoses, and it was a very, very hot day. And the lady from the kitchen had brought a tray of tea out for us, and they put milk in it. I didn't want it. There was a big argument. Well, not an argument, because you don't argue with your sub-officer when you're trying to get in the fire brigade. But it all came out. I'm a vegan, I don't drink milk. And it was like, he pushed his face into mine and said, the last one of those we had down here lasted 3 hours, but that was a man. I thought, well, check out this vegan woman, because she's staying all day. And anyway, I got in the fire brigade. And so that's how I knew to do a fireman's lift. And it has been effective. When I go to conferences, I do a lot with the London Fire Brigade now, and I'm more of kind of a women's firefighter basis. They do address it, they do acknowledge it, the veganism. It was something that was pretty much unheard of. Even women were unheard of in the fire brigade when I joined, trust me. So anyway, that's why I did the fireman's lift. So anyway, I got on to the finish, but because of that, the race organisers said, we will give you a place in this race next year if you want to come back without your toes being broken. So I thought, oh, that's great, I'll come back next year. But in the meantime, another one of my friends had said, you want to promote your message, don't you? Yes. I'm not getting through to people. Okay. There's a marathon at the North Pole. Go and do it. And then I caught it. No, I don't feel particularly proud about these races that I've run. In fact, I always my normal form of transport is either my bike or I run, and I never actually go anywhere very much apart from to do races and like on the train. But I was desperate to get this message out there. What message? End animal agriculture and end the world's problems with it. That was kind of my basic message. So going to the North Pole, because people do associate that with extreme hardship, and marathon, extreme fatigue and endurance, put the two together, and a vegan woman's done that, and Percy obviously, and then you've got something that you say, if I can win a marathon at the North Pole, you can do whatever you want to do on a vegan diet. That's the proof. I'm creating the proof for you. So I trudge off to the North Pole. I didn't actually think there would be a race at the North Pole. I thought we'd be off to somewhere with a lot of snow in Norway. We'd quickly get out, do a quick 10K and back in, say that were a long way. We might as well call it a marathon because, it was cold. But no. We were there at the North Pole, trudging around 9 laps of 3 miles and whatever. But unfortunately, the reason I went to this marathon was I actually looked into doing it. It was actually exactly the same time as the Marathon de Sable. But when I looked into it, the cost was totally prohibitive to me. Rain check, never going to do it. But the race organiser rang me and said to me, if you will do my race this year, I'll give you a place. I want you there. And I think his logic was he wanted to expose it to more women, and he couldn't get one that was stupid enough to go, that was actually able to get round it in anything like 12 hours and walk it. So I decided, that's great, I will go and I'll do this. And to be fair, the exposure I got for veganism was massive after that race, but the only thing was the race organizer didn't like it, because now he's got to a situation where he's got 50 blokes who've paid 12,000 euros to go to a race at the North Pole and be completely humiliated by a vegan woman carrying a small teddy bear. He didn't like it, you know what I mean? And they're saying, you paid for her to come and humiliate us. What are you thinking? So, but it did the job. It actually got the message of veganism out there. And some of the guys there said, you're obviously really good at this sort of running. I thought, I'm not good at any sort of running, but, why don't you go and do a world record? If you do a marathon on every continent, you'll be the quickest woman to do that in days elapsed. Anyway, long story short, I put it on a back burner. I haven't got the money, I haven't got the time, hadn't particularly got the inclination, but all the time I'm desperately trying to push this vegan message in a positive way, and I cannot make people address it. 2013, when I came back from winning the North Pole Marathon, breaking the world record, smashing the men to pieces, BBC rang me up, remember it very clearly, in my mum's cottage, arranged me to go up there. Then a researcher rang me up, to discuss various bits and pieces. The only thing that they were keen for me to say is, don't mention the fact you're veganism. We don't want you to talk about veganism on that show. And that was opening and closing BBC Breakfast. That is absolutely true. I've had that a couple of times. I've been set up by the media. You think you're going off to Sky News to talk about running for good. Next thing, they're quizzing you on, don't you think it's a bit extreme that somebody's lost his job for saying all vegans should be dead? You get all that sort of thing. There's a lot of vegan negativity out there, trust me. So anyway, I didn't think it was going to be possible, but it was niggling away. World record, Guinness World Record, animals, veganism. I want to do it. And again, I went to my mum and dad. The only thing they'd now got left is a small cottage in Tillingham, because they'd moved down to live near me. And my mum said, if you need to do this, if you think this will do what you want, if this will help the animals, we'll remortgage, go and do it. Unfortunately, they didn't have time to remortgage, and somebody did step in and sponsor me. The unfortunate thing was, I thought the jolly nice people at Guinness would, I'd say, I've done these races, here are the results, give me my world record. No, it weren't like that. It was like, we want you to take 2 people with you. You want 2 people running around with you to make sure it's you that's running, or else you can have somebody at every mile marker to take a photograph of you with the mile marker in the background. It's like, I'm going on my own with Percy. He's rubbish with a camera. What can I do? So anyway, I thought the only thing I can possibly do is go, if I go and win these races or place in these races, the race will validate it for me, because they'll have me up on the winner's podium saying this is the winner of the race, and obviously they're going to believe that. So now I'm faced with going to like a marathon every week, every other week on every continent, and winning it. But I did it. I broke 3 world records on that occasion. I'm actually the fastest woman running time to run a marathon on Antarctica and the North Pole. When I came back, I was really, really upset that even though I'd done what the press had asked me to, there was a guy from the Daily Mirror who wanted to interview me and do a big story on it. It was actually coming up to the month of December. It was just December when I arrived home. And I went back, look, I've broke 3 world records, let alone 1. Can't do the story. Why can't you do the story? And eventually he told me, it was at a time when Aldi and Lidl, one of the two, were going from the basic market and trying to transition into the luxury market, and they were advertising things like the 3-bird roast, the double chocolate trifles, in a big push up to Christmas to kind of get in there amongst the big players, like Sainsbury and Tesco. So they said, our advertisers pay our wages. We're not going to give a free advert. We're going to upset them by giving a free advert to a vegan person who's going against everything that they say. So anyway, basically, they dropped me. Story of my life. It really, really did depress me. So I went on, I just carried on with what I was doing, went back to Marathon des Sables in 2014. This is where I'm drawing in things like Compassion for All, because I've seen it. In 2014, I went back to Marathon des Sables. One guy in my tent, Mike Julien, was there. He probably shouldn't have been there. He had cancer. He was on chemotherapy, had leukemia. By the second day, he was crying. He was on his knees and he couldn't continue on in the race. He said, if I can get through the next day, which was another marathonish distance, the next day following that was the long stage, the big one. People are frightened of being alone in the desert on their own, trying to run 100k or whatever. And kind of Miss Poppet stepped up and said, okay, Mike, we've got a situation. I know what it's like to suffer in this race. I did it in 2012 myself. If you go tomorrow and you get through tomorrow's stage and you still want to do it, I will stay with you if no one else will. And I'm in 5th place overall, so I didn't really want to chuck my own race away to help Mike. And it's ironic that out of the how many 100 runners out there knew what was going on, it was the vegan woman that stepped in, and I did that. I chucked my race away. In fact, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and I don't mean this, yeah, I'm joking. I've come back to the camp at night, I've had my dinner, I've washed my socks, I've got into my bed, well, my sleeping bag, and I thought, well, that's it then, Mike's on cut-off now, he's been out there 11 hours, he's not going to be back, I hope he's all right, you know. Then I heard some clapping at the finish line. And everybody, you know, you get up to welcome in the last runners, and it was Mike, and he kind of staggered over the finish line, and it was the first person I saw, and he came over to me and threw himself into my arms and said, oh God, does your offer still stand for tomorrow? And I couldn't very well say, no, I've changed my mind now, I'm fit, I'm going to hit it hard and really go for a place, you know. And I said, yeah, if no one else will stay with you, I will stay with you. And I did stay with him, and he got through it. I went on the next day and won the marathon stage, but I chucked my race away from him. Compassion over competition. A message that even, I'll tell you something else, I was sharing my tent unintentionally with just 4 really normal guys who met at Eton. And one of them was the BBC correspondent, Tom Borridge, who was making a documentary about his journey through Marathon de Sable. And even though he knew I did that in that race, he never mentioned it in the documentary. You see Mike Julien trying to mention it, but he wouldn't mention me. You can hear me in the background. It's like my northern accent. But he never mentioned it in the race. They're not interested in anything but what they're interested in. So after that, I went off. I rebroke my world records. I've tried to keep doing things positively and mixing it up for the animals. I've just qualified to run for England in the 10K, which I thought shows the complete juxtapose between... People say, Fiona Oakes, ultra-marathon runner. I'm not even a marathon runner. I mean, certainly not an ultra-marathon runner. I spend most of the time in the desert, like shuffling about on my bottom, trying to get down these hills and stuff. I'm really not that. So I'll go back and I'll qualify for England on the road in a 10K, which is quite unprecedented to have the speed and the endurance. But as I say, I'm not very good at running at all. So, you know, I can pretty much do any of it because I'm jack of all trades, master of none. I've done all sorts of things to promote what I believe in. And seriously, my passion is the animals, but it's so much more now. When I started being vegan on my path, my journey in 2006, it was just a simple equation. And people say, oh, that's a bit radical. Radical. It's a broccoli. It's eating broccoli. It's not eating dead flesh. And I'm radical. I think not. I was 6 years old. It's a bit much. Well, no, I would argue to you that if every child knew what really happened to Peppa Pig, and today, Mrs. Bunny and Mr. Bull are coming to take Pepper and her family to the abattoir. Oh, George is crying, put your dinosaur back. You know, they would say, I don't want that too. They would, wouldn't they? So at 6, we're now listening to a 16-year-old around the world. People are listening. So at 6, it's not that unusual, surely. I just knew the truth. Something in my heart told me the truth. And that's the truth I've always tried to adhere to through the next 47 years of my life. It started for just a simple love of animals, but it's so much more now. The next part of my message is this. I'm older than a lot of certainly the youngsters here won't remember this. In 1984, shocking images, for those who remember them, came on the television. And those images were Live Aid. Live Aid. And I think I'm trying to be fair to everyone. Up until that point, the only access you had to information was what the mainstream media gave you. And genuinely, I think, certainly myself as a young girl, I'd never seen anything like the starvation. It was, are people living like this? What is this? We were seeing it. It was an absolute phenomenon. But we didn't act then. That's when we should have acted. That's when our generation should have stood. I've fought to get the vegan message out there. I've fought to make people. I've done everything I can. Ridiculous stunts. I've rescued the animals. We should have listened then. So now, trying to spoon feed people a sugar-coated message of veganism is simply not enough. It is radical now. People do not realise. I say to them, imagine if you went to a hospital and there were no nurses there to treat you. There's no health service. There's no water when the tap turns on. What are you going to do then? Because it's coming. And just because it's happening to those people back in 1984 doesn't mean it can't come to your door. Your house gets flooded. No direct line insurance. Could you come round and do me? There's nothing. There's no one to fall back on. We are the absolute end, the limit. We're the end of the road. And if we do not act now, and I think that implementing things like, we'll all have a free carrier bag. Tell them that it's not enough anymore. It might have been back in the 90s, but just taking the same consumerist model and adopting it to veganism or plant-based living is not enough. It's really radical stuff, and we need to embrace this radical stuff. Not kind of say, go plant-based and you look like this, and you can just go full steam ahead with your same old mainstream kind of consumerism. Have what you want, travel where you want. I'm entitled. None of that anymore. You've got to realise, people have really got to embrace this message that, on a Sunday afternoon, I'm afraid, you're not going down some great big shopping mall and loading up with clothes you don't need. You're actually going for a walk. You're appreciating what you've got. You're constantly on this consumer treadmill of, if you have this, you'll be happy, and if that, you'll be happy. You won't. Happiness comes from within and breathes out. And I'll tell you what, we are so blessed in this country. And the beautiful things that we've got, a beautiful kind of, even a train system that works, a health service, if I drop dead, or I get ill, I can go to the hospital. All these things that we are looking at as if they're our right. We have no right to these things, and we are losing them. We are letting the most precious things that we have just slip from us in this constant frenzy of more. So, for instance, I absolutely adored the young girls talk, because the lovely young lady, she's sitting in the audience there, gave a great talk. She is the future. She's got the message nailed. We've got to adopt it. Constantly we're trying to put plasters on wounds. We need to go back to the foundations and address the way we think and feel. Not just kind of replace one consumer model with another consumer model. We need to realise that happiness and contentment comes from in here and spreads outwards. It does not come from here and go inwards. And that is my message now, because it is, I think, from my perspective, it is becoming too late. If we have got to, yes, listen to scientists, if we've got to listen to celebrities to tell us what to do, I seriously think it is too late. We only need to open our eyes and have a look what's happening to the environment. We should be living in a society now with all the information we have available to us to make our own decisions. You can see what's happening. We need to act on it now, and it's every fundamental factor of our lives. Cooking from home, accepting less, and embracing that fact, and realising how lucky we are to have what we have. Things don't make you happy. And I think that actually, for myself, I've always known this, but when I go to races like Marathon des Sables for a week, you've got what's on your back. That's all you've got. If you can't, but I've seen grown men bartering. Head of Credit Suisse, I did in my tent once. He was having a serious discussion about how many pieces of toilet paper and Eurofem was worth if he was swapping it with this other runner. It was really, really getting nitty-gritty. So what I'm saying is, you've got everything on your back. You've basically got a marathon to do every day. It's hot. You feel terrible. But you know what? You've no mobile phone, no connectivity. You're happy. You're happy just to get through it. And luxury is relevant to what you've got available to you. And you get to these races and you arrive there, and some of the guys, I can't possibly live like this. This is absolutely disgusting. There's no toilets, no shower. Literally, it's like, oh my God, we've got this for a week. After a couple of days, they're getting back to that tent and thinking, how blessed are we? It's stopped and we can lay down, and everything takes on a different image when you're in those situations. So I'm not suggesting everybody enters a multi-stage race to learn this, but we really have to wake up and see how lucky we are. It starts with animal agriculture. It starts with plant-based living. I believe that is the thing that we can do in the immediacy to give us a little bit of time to actually address issues for the future. But it certainly doesn't end there. We've got to alter the model and the way we think and we feel and we act towards all other creatures on this planet, and realise that every action we take impacts another or many other creatures. I believe that wholeheartedly. I hope that the message is getting through to people now. It's still being avoided. It's still being avoided by politicians. It's still been reneged. It's still been laughed at. But believe you me, if we're right, there will be no one to get us out of this hole. No one. There's no plan B after. So we need to act now. And it is every action you take, think about and be responsible for. And it's learning to just literally be happy with the things that matter most, which is your health. I mean, we're not in fear of our lives. We've got food. We've got water. It doesn't matter what sort of water. When you've been desperate, you're not going, is it Evian? Is it Perrier? Don't drink that. Is it fruit flavoured? It's just water and you can drink it. And that's the most important thing. Can we imagine a world with water shortages? We live in one. There are water shortages and droughts in Africa, but we don't care in the first world because it's not affecting us now. But when it does come to our door, it will be too late. It really will be too late. So, anyway, I hope that's not too dramatic. But anyway, thank you very much for inviting me over here to speak. I hope you enjoyed it. Anybody's got any questions, more than welcome to answer them. If I know the answer, I probably don't because I don't know very much. And enjoy the rest of your lovely day in the sun. Thank you very much.